Yo, what is up? We're back in the kitchen. Today I want to show you guys how to start some easy fermented chili peppers. Our garden is popping off with all the spicy cayennes, jalapenos, and shishito peppers. And one of my favorite ways to utilize the massive bounty is a simple fermentation. Then I'll blend them all up, make it into a hot sauce, and that'll store in our fridge for a super long time. We made a big batch of hot sauce last year. It lasted all the way through the winter and up until this season. We just used the last little bit the other day, so it's time to make some more. Let's get into it, shall we? All the essentials you need are an empty glass mason jar. Depending on the amount of peppers you have, will just decide the size of jar that you need. This is some of the last batch that I made from the last chili peppers just a couple weeks ago. This is just like a concentrated, fermented chili liquid. It's kind of on the thin side. It could use a little bit of sprucing up with some salt and honey, but this is just for an example. Also got some good salt. Salt is key for fermentation. My trusty blender that'll help blend everything up. I've got a chinois or a fine mesh strainer. This will come in handy when we're straining everything, and then some sort of container to get all that juice up into when you're straining stuff out. I got this clear bowl here, all right? So this is a batch of fermented jalapenos that I started before a trip not too long ago. The coolest thing about fermentation is it just takes salt and water and time. A good filtered water is also key. I tend not to use the stuff from my tap because it's got like chlorine and some other chemicals that you don't want in there, kind of hindering the fermentation of your chilies. When you're fermenting, it's also important that you have a scale so you can correctly weigh out and use the correct amount of salt. Fermentation, it's kind of a science. It takes a little bit of math, but it's not too scary. We can work through it together, all right? So first step is just getting all the tops of these chili peppers off. You don't want that top of the chili going into the puree. There's a couple different things you can do with the strained out solids after it's fermented and blended, but having the top on there really just kind of gets in the way. I've fermented them whole with the top on, but I think it's just easier to take the top off at the beginning. So I'm just gonna run through that really quick, separating out all the tops from the bottoms, and the tops of these chili peppers can just go into my compost. All right, I got all the stems popped off from the chili peppers. And another important thing you want to do when you're fermenting is separating colors. I separated the greens from the reds because if you mix red with green, let them ferment and blend it all together, you will be left with a muddy mess of nasty looking sauce. Green and red don't mix. Keep the colors separate because we don't want poopy looking hot sauce, all right? All right, onto a scale. I'm gonna use a gram scale this time just so it's a little easier for converting. Turn on your scale with the jar on top. Load up your chili peppers. This is gonna be super spicy. It's gonna be more of a concentrate like this stuff. This stuff is straight nuclear, dudes. Nuclear. All right, and pouring over water over top of all of it until it's submerged. So the total weight of the inside of this jar is 1,456 grams. I'm gonna take that number and multiply it times 0.03. That is giving me 3%. And that means I need to add 43 grams of salt. Zero it back out. Pour the salt over top. All right, 43. Put on a lid to give it a good shake. Get all that salt dissolved. I mean, really shake it, buddy, really shake it. Make sure we have enough water to cover. Looks like those peppers took on some water. Add a little extra salt just for good measure. down with the fermentation. I'm gonna use this to press down the peppers, hold them down below the surface of the ferment. All right, going on with the lid. And this is gonna sit out on my countertop. Depends on how warm your house is. Mine's a pretty moderate temperature. Things like to take between 4 and 7-ish days. It can go longer. It'll just continue to get more sour and funky. One important thing that I like to do is leave the lid just lightly on so some air can escape. If you have it all the way tight for too long and all that gas starts to build up, this jar could become a bomb, all right? It could, but it won't, as long as you keep it just finger tight so air can escape, no problem. If you want to do cheesecloth with a rubber band on top and you're really afraid, no problem. But just a little tightness to let some gas release. Bada bing, super easy. Let it sit out between 4 and 12 days. I usually find 7-ish is the sweet spot. All right, let's just play a game and pretend that it's been 7 to 10 days and our chilies have actually changed color. All right, not just kidding. This was a batch that I did before we went on vacation. It's got my fermentation weights in here to make sure it all stayed underneath the liquid. And I'm just gonna take the entire contents of this jar, put it in the blender, and blend it all up until it's super smooth. We blended it up for a good while there to make sure that all that pulp, seeds got blended up super well, so when we strain it, we're getting as much of that plant material out of it as we can. All the pulp and everything will reserve. I like to dehydrate that to make like some chili flake. Maybe use it in a chili crisp or just powdered up in another dish. So pour this into your fine mesh strainer. And what we're really going for is the liquid that comes out in the bottom. You can use a spoon to kind of help speed up this process of getting that liquid to come out. Now just what's left is this paste that's on the inside of the colander, and this is super nice and thin and liquidy. This paste I'm gonna put onto a sheet tray with parchment paper underneath and dehydrate it, get all that moisture out, store it, save it for later, use it as some sort of spice. It'll be a real nice dehydrated powder once it's done. If you like a pulpier hot sauce, you can totally leave this pulp and not strain it out, but we like more of like a Cholula kind of vibe, thin, acidic hot sauce. So I just like to strain out the solids. I get another use out of the solids, the liquids, nice and consistent, and this is just, you know, what we're going for in this house. Different strokes for different folks. I'm showing you how I do it. You're welcome to do it any way you want, pal. So a mistake I made last year was leaving my hot sauce raw and unpasteurized. While all the good bacteria sounds like a good thing, I bottled all my hot sauce up into these cute little bottles, and dude, they became bombs. So much pressure was created on the inside of those bottles, they were exploding in my fridge, they were exploding in my pantry. I would take them out and give them as gifts. They would explode in the freaking person's fridge, dude. It was all bad. So this year I'm pasteurizing my hot sauces. I can get my good bacteria from somewhere else. I don't want hot sauce exploding in my fridge, all right? So next step we're gonna do here is pasteurize this liquid. Since it's fermented, it's got all that bacteria in there. The flavor will change as we go, and we wanna create something that'll stay nice, stay consistent, and be nice and similar all throughout the year. So I'm going in with this jalapeno juice just into the pan. We're not really looking for a boil. We're not really looking for anything too crazy. Just bring it up until it's hot enough and steaming, and we'll cut it off. Our concentrated liquid's been brought up to a temperature just before boiling. I'm gonna pour it into a container to store it for later. With all the processing and stuff coming out of our garden and stuff that I'm foraging that's been happening, I'm not making my hot sauce yet. This is the first step or first stage to it. I still want to add some like onion and garlic, maybe some other flavors, and definitely thicken it. So down in the description of this video, I'll add a couple different ways I'm gonna experiment with thickening. Last year I used xanthan gum, which was fine. I like to avoid those additives and gums if I can. I've seen some people use, what are they called? The little slimy seeds. I've seen people use chia seeds, soak them in their hot sauce and then blend it all together, and it gives a nice natural thickening to it. So not exactly sure which route I'm gonna go now, but since there's such a high salt content in the fermentation that's happened in these concentrates, these will last a whole lot longer in my fridge than the chilies would previously. They were starting to go bad or would go bad on my counter. So these will chill in the fridge for a little bit until I get enough time to be able to turn them into hot sauce. Yeah, you know, a nice green kind of salsa-y, more mild one. This one's definitely gonna be on the hotter, more nuclear side. Pretty stoked about it. Making your own hot sauce is pretty awesome. If you want to start making your own hot sauce, you just gotta start trying it, dude. It's not as scary as what you think. It's super fun. It's super rewarding. You learn a lot. And you know, the worst that happens is you mess a batch up, you learn something, and you make a new batch next year, all right? Fermentation is dope. Fermentation can add a ton of flavor without very many inputs. People have been doing it for thousands of years, and you can too. Thanks for being here. Tune in until next time. Maybe I'll make a video about how I finish these hot sauces. Maybe I don't. You're awesome. I appreciate you. All right. Happy cooking.